All right, so we have a working server, right? It works locally, it works remotely, it connects to a database, right? It has a tiny little API, it has a repository, it can receive GET requests. Right, so let's focus now more on the client side, right? Let's start using HTML, some JavaScript in here, and working on the first assignment, which is the creating a user admin jQuery client. All right, so let's do that. So let's go to our application here, our Spring Boot application, and under our web app directory. Under our web app directory, we only have this index file, right? Which really we're not going to be using. We're not going to be using. Instead, what we're going to be doing here is that we're going to add a couple of directories in here. And they're going to host different versions of different clients, right? For instance, for this week, we're going to be implementing a jQuery client, right? So this is going to be running on the browser, talking to the server, sending requests, say, hey, just like we did retrieving hellos, it's going to retrieve maybe all the users. Retrieve all the users. Once I have all the users, I'll display them on the client. Yes, all right. But the following week, we're going to be using the same exact middle tier, right, server, but hosting a React version of the same client, right? That is going to be working with other features, right? But it'll be a React version of this, all right? So that's why here we're going to have a couple of directories to host different versions of browser clients, right? So we'll create here a directory called jQuery, where we're going to put our jQuery implementation. So jQuery. All right. So here we go. jQuery. So let's make sure that that we have that there. Inside of this jQuery, the different pages that we're going to be creating, the login page, the register page, the what else? The profile page, the user admin. We're going to be putting them under different directories. Okay, we're going to be putting them under a components directory. Not that these are going to be actual components, but I want to start introducing you to the idea of components. Next week we'll dive into the more in depth what a component is. But I just want to start to introduce you to the jargon and the concept here. And there are going to be several components. There are going to be in this first implementation, we're going to be implementing the user admin component. Okay, and the user admin is going to have an HTML file here. Let's see if we can create an HTML file here. There's no HTML. Why is there no HTML here? Web. Where's web page? Where? Oh, HTML? Oh, there it is. Thank you. And we'll call this, remember there was a naming convention, right? There was a naming convention that we're going to be creating an HTML file, but it's not going to be a static HTML file, right? It's not going to have static content. Instead, it's going to have most of the HTML that we need, but it's going to be meant to be modified dynamically by JavaScript, right? So JavaScript is going to come in here, right? It's going to parse the content of the HTML file. It's going to grab some content, maybe copy and paste it multiple times, right? Or dynamically add things or change dynamic content in there, yes? So this is not a true HTML file that it's meant to be consumed on its own, right? It's meant to be used within the context of a JavaScript file that is dynamically modifying it, yes? Right? So to that end, we need to capture that in the name of the file, right? So we'll start off first by giving it the name of the feature, right? So it's a user admin. That's the feature that we're trying to implement. Then we'll follow with the name of the role this file plays in the application, right? Its role is to provide a template, right? An HTML template where it will provide most of the content, but it's meant to not to be consumed on its own, right? It's not static, right? It's meant to be dynamically generated. And also, this is a template that is not generated on the server like a JSP would, right? Or ASP or PHP, right? Those would be templates that will be dynamically generated on the server, right? These are templates that are dynamically generated on the client, right? So we'll capture that as well. This is client. And there it is. Okay, there's our HTML file. And just to make sure that we are in here, let's do an H1 and do an user admin. So H1 just says that this is a header, is the biggest size header. Notice that HTML files, they all start with the HTML opening tag and the closing tag. There it is. And it has two sections, the head section and the body section, right? The head section allows us to configure meta things about the web page, right? Like the title that shows up here, any dependencies that this file might have with other files, okay, like styling files, JavaScript files, other files that are dependent. The actual main content that is consumable by the user goes in the body. This is what the human beings read. All right. Okay, so let's see if that locally we can hit that. That's not locally. Where's my local? Is that my local? That's not my local. There it is. This is my local. Let's move it here. And this would be under where? I think it's under jQuery. What was it? Components. What else? User admin. That's not it. Oh, okay, no. We called it user admin template client.html. There it is. Okay, so we're in that directory. Okay. But one thing that you should notice here, right? Notice that we're hitting here static HTML content. You see that? Right. So this URL, right? That path there is physically mapped to a physical file, right? And it came back with some HTML content, some ASCII content that came back. And you could see, you could go to inspect, and you can view the communication with the server. You can say network, and you can say refresh, and there's our template. There it is. This is the GET request the browser made, right, to the server. This is the URL that went out to the server. The server said is okay. This is what came back. This is the static HTML ASCII that came back from the server. This is how the browser interpreted the HTML file, right? It created a data model of that file, right? An object representation of that file, which you can navigate. You're looking at the elements. The elements this is what the browser understood when it parsed that HTML file. Okay, it created an HTML object, right? Under there, it created two objects, the head object and the body object, and you can navigate through them, right? And notice that it highlights on the left-hand side how the right-hand side object is being rendered on the left-hand side. See that? Okay, and notice that it puts some coloring and some bordering around that. See that? Right? That is specifying on the right-hand side that body is. You can see it on the right-hand side. When you hover over it, notice that orange or salmon color, right? Notice that on here, it's showing that all that around is 8 pixels all around. That's the default styling, right? That all browsers have the standard styling, right? If you don't provide and override any styling, this is the default styling, right? So it automatically adds an 8-pixel border all around your document. Okay. This picture here is what sometimes we refer to as the box model, right? Of how the browser understands what's the area that it's going to use to represent your content, right? And it keeps track of how much space is there between one content and the next, right? That's called a margin. This is the space between other objects or other content and myself. Then there is the border, any borders around your content, any internal padding, and then the actual content. And it shows here how many pixels it uses for each one of them. Right now, there's no border, there's no padding, right? There's only margins, right? And the content is the size of the content. Okay? And notice the coloring. That'll be very important later on when we start styling our content. All right, and finally, there's H1 for the headings. All right, so what I wanted to point out is that this path here is mapped to a physical file, yes? Whereas API/hello, it's not mapped to any physical file. See that? It's mapped to what? It's mapped to a function that's going to execute, and it's going to dynamically return some data. See that? All right. So the browser doesn't distinguish between any of them, right? For the browser, these are just paths. Okay. But for the server, it's important because it might not understand that certain things are files, static files, but other things are dynamic content, dynamic data, right? So for us to distinguish ourselves, to make straighten our heads that, hey, certain things are data and certain things are static content, right? To distinguish that, we use the naming convention that anything that generates data is going to start with /API, right? That's a very common industry standard or industry convention, not a standard. It's a very common naming convention, /API, and then whatever data that you're asking for. Yes? This is so that you don't confuse and you don't actually create a directory called /API under your web app, right? So that then the server would be completely confused, right? Imagine if you had under web app, you actually had a directory called API, right? And you actually had a file called hello, right? Now the server will be totally messed up. So say, well, what do you mean? Do you want the file called hello, or do you want the data that executed to that function? So don't do that, right? You'll get the server confused, right? So for us to remember not to do that, we follow that naming convention. Okay. Delete. Where's delete? Delete. Here we go. All right. So let's continue. We want our user admin. Let's see. We want a table, and that table, as the name suggests, is for displaying tabular data, right? Things that have rows, things that have columns, that have typically records that might have the same fields, okay, the same data types for the same column. They're not meant to lay out content, right? Early on in HTML, folks got complacent and started using tables, misusing tables for laying out content. One of the things that you'll notice soon is that HTML was originally intended to be read from top to bottom, right, as a very long, continuous piece of content, right? There are no page breaks. It wasn't meant for for writing articles that had columns and things like that. It wasn't natively. It doesn't support content that is displayed in columns, for instance. Things are displayed from left to right, right? It's typically for things that are read from top to bottom. And so folks, when HTML became so popular, started saying, wait a minute, I want to write kind of like an article like I do for a newspaper or magazine, right? Where I want many columns, and HTML doesn't natively support that, but tables do, right? Tables allow you to create any number of columns. So folks started misusing tables for the wrong things. Later on, we'll show you how the proper way of using and declaring creating article side-by-side content using style sheets. Okay, but for tables, only use tables for what they're meant for tabular content. All right. So here's my table. Tables are made up of multiple rows. They're made up of also several meta areas. One of them is the head, head. The body, and the footer. Okay. So the head, as the name suggests, is kind of where you're going to put the headings. Right. The body is where you're going to put the main content. Right. And the foot is the very last row that you might want to put at the bottom of the table. So for the head, we're going to create a row, and that first row is going to hold the headings of the table. So for the users, we're going to typically just have maybe the username, first name, last name, their role, following the whatever the assignment asks of us. Here we can say that this is a table heading. There's going to be a username. We might have here also the password. Not that we're going to be displaying the password, but we're going to be using this to be able to create users as well. So maybe we have here the first name, and we have the last name. All right, so let's keep it simple. Let's keep it there. If we refresh, this is what we get. Right, there's our table, really ugly. Maybe we can. Doesn't even look like a table. Let's put the border to be 1, so at least we could see that there's borders around each one of these. And indeed, it is a table. Let's add also some content here. Let's to the body. I'm just going to copy a table row here, and I'm just going to paste it here. Oops. There it is. And if we refresh, I'm not going to use thead. Th is to declare that this is a heading of the table. Instead, what we're going to do here is I want to declare this as table data, just plain old data in the table. Right. So let's copy that. And here let's create Alice, no password, or maybe a hidden password. And this might be Alice. Last name, Wonderland. So there it is. We have our first user there, hard-coded in there. Obviously, we would not want to hard-code any of this content. Typically, we want to go back to the server and say, server, give me all the users because I want to just display them here. All right, but let's create a couple just to look at what it would look like visually. So maybe this is Bob, and this is Bob Hope. So we have 2 users in there, right? What else might we have here? Typically, we might also have an input field or fields that we can enter content. Maybe this would be an input field to type in a username, a password, a first name, and a last name. Right. So this would be a form, right, that we could fill out. The content, right, and maybe press a button, and this would create the user. Maybe we could give the users an idea of what we expect them to type in. Placeholder, and this might be give a Joe for the password. This is a password, so this would be a type password, so that it will hide the content as you type. So this is type password. This is another placeholder. And another placeholder. And this would be John, and this is Doe. So this is G-Doe. Oops. So there it is. So this is it's grayed out, right? So that to give us kind of an idea of what we expect them to type under there. And this one is hidden, so you can't see what it says. All right, awesome. The last couple of things here, we might add some buttons. So maybe a dummy, empty last column, so that at the last one we might add a button here. We might say this is a button that says create. This allows us to create a new user. Right, and maybe at the end of each one of these, we might have a delete. It says delete. Well, it has a delete next to each one of these, right? Now this looks terrible. So to make this a little prettier, we're going to bring on a CSS library that we're going to be using throughout the semester. One of them is Bootstrap. If you prefer to use any other library, that's fine. materials, if you want to use materials, use that, or foundation. There's quite a few other ones that you can use, but you need to provide an equivalent implementation of what Bootstrap provides. So let's bring that on. We can load that library right here. We can say we can link to that library. There it is. We need to tell the browser that this is indeed a style sheet. Otherwise, you won't know what to do with it. Style. I hate Eclipse. Style sheet. There it is. Let's reload that. Okay, it's a little prettier. At least the font is a little prettier, and we can start styling this a little bit. For instance, we can say that this is a div, and this is a class container, and these are all Bootstrap classes, to add some responsiveness, so that as it gets smaller, the content gets bigger or smaller. We can style the table, saying that this is a table. We can remove the border. We can say class table. So now it's styled as a table. It has nice, better borders and whatnot. We can style also the input fields. And we can say that these are all class form control. I think form control. These are all form controls. Okay, so those are now rounded corners that if you click on it, it highlights. So it adds all these additional styling cues. Plus the button, we might also want to paint those as well. We might say that these are buttons. These are success, is it? Success for create. Okay, that makes it green, like the success money green. And we might paint the other ones maybe in red over here, and this is red. Typically in Western culture, danger. Red is danger. So let's grab that. We'll paint those two buttons to be red as delete, right? And we can instead use perhaps icons, right, where we have an X or a plus or something like that. And for that, perhaps you might want to explore looking at Font Awesome. Font Awesome is a library. It's an open source library of hundreds of free icons that you can include. You can find you also the space shuttle and the bathtub, coffee. There's tons of things in there that certainly you can reuse, and I believe it is required as part of the assignment, right? Anyway, so the very last thing is that we might want to commit this, git add git commit am is started with user admin. Git, so now let's push git push Heroku master. So let's push that and make sure that at the end of the day we have everything pushed to the remote side, and that that's still up and running. All right, so that's up and running. Let's go here and let's see if we can hit the remote site. So this is the excuse me. The remote site. Thank you. Let's do Heroku open maybe. No. Come on, Heroku. Really? Anyway, this would be under where? It would be under jQuery, right? jQuery. What is it? Components. User admin. User admin dot templates dot client dot html. There it is. Okay, it's been deployed remotely. Okay. All right, so I'm also going to push this to an open GitHub, right? And I'm going to share it on Piazza so that you can look at it, what we've done so far, and perhaps got started from here, right, and start working on your own assignment. All right? All right, thank you.